The music room was the loudest place in the whole school, but for the boy, it was the quietest. He stood just inside the doorway, his backpack hanging from one shoulder, his eyes taking in the bright, busy scene. Other kids were laughing, shoving each other toward the rack of tambourines and triangles, or blowing random, shrieking notes into plastic recorders. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. To everyone else, the room was a chaotic symphony of noise. To him, it was a vivid, moving painting, completely silent. His name was Leo. He was 10 years old, and he had been born deaf. The world for him was not built of sounds, but of sights, textures, and vibrations. He could feel the heavy thump of a dropped book through the soles of his shoes. He could see the ripple of laughter on his classmates' faces. He could sense the steady, deep hum of the school's heating system if he pressed his hand against the wall. But the music they talked about, the melodies and harmonies, those were stories other people told him. His mother would sign them to him, her hands painting pictures in the air. Music is like a feeling that people can hear, she would say, her expression soft and searching. It can be happy, like jumping in a puddle, or sad, like watching the last leaf fall from a tree. Leo understood feelings. He just didn't understand how air moving could make them. His mother, a woman with kind eyes and hands that were always warm, believed in trying everything. When the form for music class came home, she didn't hesitate. She checked the box, wrote a careful note to the teacher, and arranged for an interpreter to be there. It's about being part of it. She signed to him that morning, her movements firm and encouraging. You might find your own way in. Leo wasn't so sure. New classes meant new stairs, new ways to feel separate. The teacher for the general music class was nice enough. She smiled a lot and had a bright purple scarf. She welcomed Leo and his interpreter, a calm man who would stand nearby and translate the spoken words into swift, clear signs. Leo found a seat near the back, his eyes already wandering. They didn't stop at the drums or the xylophone. They went straight to the big, dark shape in the corner. Standing like a silent giant against the wall dot, it was an old, upright piano. Its black lacquer was scratched and cloudy, and one of the brass pedals was missing its rubber cap. But to Leo, it was fascinating. It was so big, so solid. It looked like a piece of furniture that held a secret. The director of the school chorus was a different sort of man. Mr. Hendricks didn't visit the general music class often, but he happened to be there that first day, dropping off some sheet music. He was tall, with a tired face and glasses that he was always polishing on the edge of his shirt. He had been teaching choir for 25 years, and in that time, he believed he had learned to spot a musical ear from across a room. He believed in scales, in pitch matching, in the pure auditory gift of music. It was, to him, the most important thing. He noticed the new boy and the interpreter right away. He watched for a moment as the teacher explained quarter notes, her voice rising and falling, and saw the boy's eyes fixed on the interpreter's hands, not on her. Mr. Hendricks felt a familiar, heavy feeling in his chest. It was a mix of pity and a stubborn, practical resignation. He walked over to the classroom teacher as the kids broke out to try instruments. The new boy, Mr. Hendricks, said quietly, nodding toward Leo. "He's deaf?" "Profoundly, from birth," the teacher whispered back. "But his mother wants him fully included. We have the interpreter." Mr. Hendricks looked at Leo, who was now slowly walking toward the piano, drawn to it like a magnet. The boy didn't reach for the keys. He just stood very close, looking at its shape. Mr. Hendricks sighed, a soft sound lost in the noise of the room. He didn't say it to be mean. He truly believed it, based on everything his life and work had taught him. He spoke the words as a simple, sad fact. "He'll never play," Mr. Hendricks said, almost to himself. Then he straightened his papers and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. Leo didn't see him leave. He was in his own world now. The teacher had said it was exploration time. The other kids were making what looked like a glorious, hilarious mess. He saw a girl bang a cymbal and flinch at the sound and laugh. He saw a boy puff out his cheeks on a recorder, his face turning red. Everyone was reacting to something he couldn't access. He took another step toward the piano. It was safer over here, away from the frantic movement. His interpreter followed, watching him closely. Leo raised a hand, not to the keys, but to the wood on the side. It was smooth and cool. He let his fingertips trail over it. Then, very carefully, he pressed a single white key with his other hand. He saw the hammer move inside. He felt a tiny click under his finger. But more importantly, he felt it. A vibration, a living tremor, traveled from the string, through the massive wooden frame of the piano, and into the wall against which it stood. It was a short, soft buzz against his palm, where it rested on the piano side. His eyes widened. He pressed the key again, holding it down longer. This time, he leaned in and gently pressed the side of his face against the piano's wooden body. The experience was not sound. It was a physical sensation, rich and complex. It was a deep, warm pulse that filled the bone of his cheek and traveled down his neck. It was a feeling, clear and direct. He pulled back and stared at the key, then at the place where his face had been. He looked at his interpreter, his expression full of stunned wonder. He signed, a quick flash of his hands. Again, bigger. The interpreter, understanding, signed back, try a black key. Leo moved his finger to a black key, higher up, and pressed. He placed his whole hand flat on the piano top. This vibration was different, sharper, brighter, a quicker tingle that danced on his skin. It was a totally different feeling. A low note was a thick, rolling wave. A high note was a skittering, light buzz. For the rest of the class, Leo conducted experiments. He would press two keys together and lay both hands on the piano, feeling the vibrations mix and clash. Sometimes they felt jumbled and uneasy, a rough sensation. Other times they felt smooth and right, like two puzzle pieces sliding together in his chest. He didn't think of it as music. He thought of it as a new kind of touch. The piano, this silent giant, was talking to him through its skin. And for the first time in that loud, confusing room, Leo didn't feel left out. He felt like he was the only one having a real conversation. When the bell rang, he pulled away reluctantly. On the walk home, his interpreter explained to his mother what had happened. He was very focused on the piano's vibrations, the interpreter said. Leo's mother watched her son's face. He wasn't looking at them. He was staring at his own hands, turning them over in the afternoon sun, as if he had discovered they could do magic. A small, hopeful smile touched her lips. Maybe this was the way in Dot, back in the silent world of his home, Leo could still feel the echo of that deep-sea note in his bones. It was a feeling that didn't fade. It was a secret he and the piano shared. And Mr. Hendrix's words, "He'll never play," were already being forgotten, washed away by the memory of a vibration that had, for the first time, made the silent world feel powerfully, physically alive. The feeling from the piano didn't leave him. It followed Leo home, a ghost of a vibration in his fingertips. That night, at the dinner table, the usual quiet was different. His mother watched as he would occasionally press a fingertip against his water glass, then against the table, a little frown of concentration on his face. He was comparing. The glass gave a thin, high ring he could barely feel. The table was dead and solid. Nothing was like the piano. His mother finally asked, her hands moving gently in their shared language. "What is it? What are you thinking about?" Leo looked up, his eyes bright. The big box in the music room. The one with teeth. The piano? She signed. He nodded. It talks. Not with words. It talks here. He put a small fist over the center of his chest. You push, and it answers in your hands. In your face. She listened, her heart doing a funny little squeeze. She had tried for so long to explain music to him, and here he was, explaining a new kind of it back to her. Do you want to go see it again? She asked. His answer was immediate. Yes, but music class was only twice a week. The days in between felt long. Leo found himself tapping rhythms on his desk, not hearing the pattern, but feeling the knock of his knuckles against the wood. He watched people's feet in the hallway, seeing the rhythm of their walks. He was starting to see the world in pulses and beats, a silent movie with a soundtrack he could only feel. When the next music class finally came, Leo went straight to the piano. He didn't wait for permission. The other kids were used to him now, the quiet boy who hung around the old piano. They left him to it. Mr. Hendricks was not there. This was just the general class, with a nice teacher in the purple scarf, who smiled at Leo and let him explore. This time, Leo was more deliberate. He started at one end, pressing each white key slowly, one after another, keeping his left hand flat on the piano's side. He was making a map. The far left keys made a deep, slow roll that traveled up his arm. It felt like the rumble of a distant train. As he moved to the right, the feeling changed. The vibrations got quicker, lighter, more like a buzz than a rumble. The highest notes were sharp, tiny pinpricks of feeling. Then he tried the black keys. They felt different again. They weren't just higher or lower. They were spicier. The feeling was more complex, a little twist in the middle of the vibration. He discovered that if he pressed a white key and the black key right next to it at the same time, the feeling was jangling and unsettled. It made the muscles in his arm feel tight. But if he pressed a white key and then another white key 5 steps away, the vibrations sometimes flowed together into one smooth, complete feeling. He was so focused on this physical world that he didn't notice the classroom had gotten quieter. A few kids had gathered to watch. They didn't understand what he was doing. He wasn't playing a song. He was pressing random keys, then sitting very still with his eyes closed, his face pressed against the wood. One boy snickered. What's he doing? Is he sleeping? The teacher shushed them. He's feeling the music, she said, though she wasn't quite sure herself. Leo's interpreter, always close by, saw the confusion. He moved a little closer to the watching kids and spoke quietly. He can't hear the notes you hear. He's feeling the vibrations they make. To him, a low note feels like this, he said, making a slow rolling motion with his hands. And a high note feels like this. He made a quick shivering motion. A girl with glasses stared, fascinated. So, he's listening with his hands? With his whole body, the interpreter said. Leo, unaware of this conversation, had made a discovery. He found a chord. It was an accident. He put 3 fingers on 3 specific white keys, pressed down, and leaned in. The vibration that came back was not messy or conflicting. It was full and round and warm. It spread through the wood and into his bones like sunlight spreading on a cold morning. It felt resolved, complete, a deep, calm sigh in his chest. He opened his eyes, a look of pure wonder on his face. He didn't have a word for it, but he had found harmony. He took his hands off quickly, as if the keys were hot. Then he carefully put his fingers back in the exact same spots and did it again. Yes, there it was. That perfect, warm feeling. He looked over at his interpreter, his expression urgent. What is this? He signed quickly. This feeling. It has a name? The interpreter came over, Leo showed him the keys. The interpreter knew a little about music. That is called a C major chord, he signed. Chord. Leo repeated the sign. He pointed to the jangling, uncomfortable feeling he'd found earlier. And that? That is discord, or dissonance. It means the sounds are fighting. Leo stored these words away. Harmony, discord. They weren't just words. They were physical truths. Harmony felt like a smooth stone. Discord felt like a prickly burr. For the rest of the class, he hunted. He tried to find other combinations that gave the harmony feeling. Some did, many didn't. It was a puzzle made of feeling. When the bell rang, he was the last to leave. He gave the piano one last pat on its side, a thank you dot at home. He tried to explain it to his mother. He took her hands and put them flat on the kitchen table. He tapped a slow, heavy rhythm on one side of the table, then a fast, light one on the other. Low, high, he signed. Then he tried to show her a chord by drumming all his fingers in a pleasant, unified pattern. She laughed, a silent shaking of her shoulders, and pulled him into a hug. She understood enough. He had found a door into a world she thought was locked. Later that week, his mother was talking to a neighbor in their apartment building. The neighbor was moving and couldn't take everything. I've got this old piano, the neighbor moaned. No one wants it. It's out of tune and a key sticks. I'll have to pay someone to take it away. Leo's mother stopped. She looked at the woman. A piano? Yeah, a big old upright. A real dinosaur. Can I see it? She asked. The piano was in the neighbor's garage, dusty and forgotten. It was even older than the school's, its wood scratched and dull. The mother pressed a key. It made a soft, thunky sound. But more importantly, she felt the vibration. She thought of Leo's face, lit up with discovery. She thought of Mr. Hendrix's words, which she had somehow heard about. He'll never play. We'll take it, she heard herself say. 2 days later, with the help of the interpreter and a borrowed dolly, the giant, silent creature was moved into their small living room. It took up a whole wall. Leo came home from school and stopped dead in the doorway. He stared at the piano. Then he looked at his mother, his eyes huge, asking a silent question. She smiled and nodded. It's yours, she signed. To explore. Leo didn't run. He walked slowly to the piano, as if approaching a sleeping animal. He sat on the worn bench. He looked at the sea of black and white keys. He took a deep breath and placed his hands gently on them. Here, there was no bell to end class. Here, there were no other kids to watch. Here, it was just him and the vibrations. He pressed the first key, and the familiar tremor traveled up through the bench and into his body. A slow smile spread across his face. The map was his to draw now, and he had all the time in the world. The search for that warm, sunny feeling that harmony could truly begin. The piano in the living room changed everything. It was like a new person had moved in, a quiet giant who spoke only through shivers and shakes. For Leo, the world now had a new center. After school, he wouldn't go to his room or turn on the TV. He would walk straight to the bench, sometimes still wearing his backpack. At first, it was just exploration. He repeated his experiments from school, mapping the geography of feeling from the low, rumbling end to the high, tinkling end. The sticky key, the one that didn't spring back, became a familiar landmark. He learned that the vibrations traveled differently through the floorboards, and that if he took off his shoes and socks, he could feel them even better in his bare feet. His mother watched him. She would sit on the sofa with a book, but her eyes were rarely on the pages. They were on her son's face, a mirror of intense concentration. She saw his small hands, so careful and deliberate, pressing clusters of keys. She saw him close his eyes, his head tilted, his whole body still, listening with his skin. He wasn't making music, as she knew it. He was conducting a silent science experiment on his own heart. He began to develop a language for it, signing to her or his interpreter at school. The lowest notes weren't just low. They were storm cloud notes. The highest were star twinkle. The nice, warm feeling of a chord was smooth stone. The ugly, jangling feeling was tangled wire. One rainy afternoon, something shifted. Leo was trying to find a way back to that smooth stone feeling he'd found at school, the C major chord. He found it on his own piano. The familiar, warm pulse filled the wood. But instead of pulling his hands away, he let them rest on the keys, keeping the chord alive. He leaned forward, pressing his chest right against the side of the piano. The vibration traveled through the wood and into the bones of his rib cage. It didn't just stay there. It seemed to spread, a slow, golden warmth, right to the center of him. It filled a space he didn't know was empty. A feeling rose up, so strong and sudden it was like a wave crashing over him. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was bigger. It was a feeling of things being deeply, perfectly right. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled up in his closed eyes and spilled down his cheeks. He didn't sob or make a sound. He just sat there, holding the chord, crying silently as the vibration sang into his body. His mother, from the sofa, saw the tears. Her heart lurched. She thought he was hurt or frustrated. She was on her feet in an instant, crossing the room. She touched his shoulder gently. Leo jumped, his eyes flying open. The chord stopped. He saw the worry on her face and quickly wiped his cheeks, embarrassed. But the feeling was still inside him, echoing. What's wrong? Does it hurt? She signed, her movements quick with concern. Leo shook his head fiercely. He struggled to find the signs. The feeling was too big for simple words. He pointed to the keys, then put both hands flat over his own heart. His face was desperate for her to understand. The beautiful shake, he signed. His hands moved slowly, searching for the right shapes. It doesn't stop in the hands. It goes inside here. Fits. He placed his hand over his heart again and looked at her, his wet eyes wide and earnest, not his mother's own eyes filled with tears then. She finally understood. He wasn't just feeling vibrations. He was feeling emotion. The music was reaching him. It was traveling a different road, a road of physical sensation, but it was arriving at the exact same destination, the human heart. She pulled him into a tight hug, the kind that speaks when words fail. He hugged her back, clinging tightly, still feeling the last echoes of the chord in his bones. From that day on, Leo's time at the piano changed. It was no longer just a search. It was an expression. He started trying to make stories out of the feelings. He would start with low, troubled rumbles for storm cloud. Then he would search for clashing, tangled wire chords that felt like confusion. He would play them in a slow, heavy rhythm that made the floorboards groan. Then he would hunt through the keys, his brow furrowed, until he found a sequence of smooth stone chords that felt like the clouds breaking. He would play these lighter, quicker, letting the vibration feel like sunlight on his face. He was composing. Not a tune anyone could hum, but a map of a feeling. A journey from sad to hopeful, all told in vibrations. At school, the music teacher noticed a difference. Leo was more confident at the old classroom piano. His explorations had a pattern now, a intention. The other kids had grown curious. The girl with glasses, especially, would often wander over. She didn't say anything, just watched his hands and his face. One day, she very hesitantly reached out and touched the piano lid while Leo was pressing a deep, rumbling cluster of keys. She felt the powerful tremor. She looked at Leo, her eyes wide, and gave him a thumbs up. Leo smiled back, a rare, bright smile. The news of the piano in his living room got around. His interpreter mentioned it to the music teacher, who was delighted. But the story also, in the way school stories do, eventually reached the ears of Mr. Hendricks, the chorus director. He heard it in the teacher's lounge. That deaf boy in 4th grade? He's got a piano at home now. Spends hours on it, his mom says. Mr. Hendricks sipped his coffee, his expression unchanged. He felt a pang of something, maybe sympathy for the mother's hopes, which he saw as misguided. "That's nice," he said, his voice neutral. "It's a good tactile toy for him." He didn't say he'll never play again. But the thought was still there, settled deep in his mind. To him, a toy was all it was. A complicated, vibrating toy. Music required an ear. It required listening and correcting and matching pitch. A person who could not hear a single note could no more play music than a person who was blind could paint a sunset. It was a simple, sad fact of life. The boy's emotional connection to the vibrations was touching. He supposed like a child feeling the rhythm of a washing machine. But it wasn't music. He had no ill will. In fact, he thought the general music teacher was doing a good thing by being so inclusive. But in his world of choir festivals and solo competitions, of perfect thirds and clean fifths, there was simply no place for what this boy was doing. It lived outside the boundaries of his understanding. Leo, of course, knew nothing of this. His world was getting bigger, not smaller. He had discovered that by using the pedals with his feet, he could make the vibrations last longer, letting them swirl and mix together like colors in water. He found that if he played a very low storm cloud note and then quickly played a high, bright star twinkle note, the contrast made him laugh with delight. It felt like a surprise. One evening, his mother asked him, "What does your favorite one feel like? The one that made you cry?" Leo thought about it. He went to the piano and played the C major chord. He let it ring, putting his hand on the wood. He turned to her. "It feels like you," he signed simply. "When you hug me, safe and full." His mother had to turn away then, pretending to look for something in the kitchen so he wouldn't see her cry. Her silent boy in his silent world had just told her he loved her, using a language made of wood, wire, and vibration. And in that moment, she knew that whatever Mr. Hendricks or anyone else thought, her son was already doing something more important than playing music. He was speaking with his soul, and the piano was his voice. The winter concert was the biggest event of the school year. Posters went up in the hallway, covered in glittering snowflakes. Excitement buzzed in the air, a feeling Leo could see in the quick steps and animated faces of the other kids. The chorus, led by Mr. Hendricks, would be the main event. But there was also a tradition. A solo performance would open the entire show. It could be a singer, a violinist, or a pianist. An audition was held for any student brave enough to try. Leo saw the poster. He saw the word piano, clearly written. He watched as a few older kids in the hallways talked about it nervously. He felt a new, strange pull in his stomach. It wasn't an idea that came in words. It was a feeling, a physical memory of the beautiful shake traveling from the piano to his heart. He wanted to share that. Not the sound, but the feeling. That afternoon, with his interpreter's help, he asked the general music teacher about the audition. The teacher, a kind woman who had seen his deep connection to the instrument, was surprised but supportive. "Of course you can try, Leo," she said, though she couldn't quite imagine how it would work. She explained it to Mr. Hendricks, who was in charge of the auditions. Mr. Hendricks was sitting at his cluttered desk in the choir room when he heard. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He saw the music teacher's hopeful expression and the determined look on the boy's face beside her. A wave of frustration washed over him, not at the boy, but at the situation. This was a concert, not a science fair. The audience came to hear music. They wouldn't understand a performance based on vibration. He saw it as a recipe for embarrassment for Leo, for the school, for himself. But he was also a man bound by rules. The audition was open to all students. He couldn't say no outright without looking like the villain. He put his glasses back on and gave a slow, tired nod. "All right," he said. "Auditions are Thursday after school. He can have a slot." The word spread among the staff. The chorus director was letting the deaf boy audition for the piano solo. Some teachers thought it was beautifully inclusive. Others whispered that it was a pity, a setup for a sad spectacle. Mr. Hendricks heard the whispers and set his jaw. He would be professional. He would let the boy play, and the reality of the situation would be clear to everyone that Thursday came. The audition was held in the big auditorium. It felt huge and empty, with only a few people there. Mr. Hendricks, the music teacher, the school principal, and 2 other teachers who were helping with the concert. They sat in the 3rd row, clipboards on their laps. A few other students had already performed a girl who played a neat, careful sonatina, a boy who fumbled through a pop song. They had been nervous, their notes sometimes shaky, but it was recognizably music. Leo walked in with his interpreter. The grand piano on the stage looked like a giant sleeping whale. The lights were dim, except for a single bright one shining on the piano bench. Leo didn't look at the judges. He climbed the steps, sat on the bench, and looked at the keys. He placed his hands in his lap and took a deep breath. Just like he did at home, Mr. Hendricks leaned forward. This was it, the moment that would confirm what he knew. He prepared to hear noise. He prepared to find a kind, diplomatic way to say, "Thank you," and move on. Leo began to play. What came out of the piano was not a melody. It was a landscape of sound, strange and foreign to the ear. It began with a deep, thunderous rumble from the lowest keys, played with a heavy, insistent rhythm. Asterisk boom, 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 boom. It was the storm cloud feeling, the vibration of loneliness. Then his right hand jumped to the higher keys, playing sharp, disconnected clusters of notes. They clashed and jangled, the tangled wire of confusion. There was no tune to follow. It was all dissonance, a chaotic, rumbling, clattering series of sounds. Mr. Hendricks listened, his face a mask of polite attention, but inside his heart sank. It was just as he feared. It was unstructured noise. It was not music. He saw the other teachers shifting in their seats, glancing at each other with uncomfortable pity. He gave it a full minute, then gently cleared his throat, ready to stop the audition. This was cruel to let it go on. But then he looked at Leo's face. The boy's eyes were closed. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening to something deep within. His expression was not one of confusion or randomness. It was a portrait of total focus, of profound feeling. A slight frown during the stormy parts, a searching look during the clashing ones. He was not just hitting keys. He was feeling every single vibration, traveling on a journey only he could map. And then something else caught Mr. Hendricks's eye. The choir teacher, a young woman named Miss Alvarez, was not looking at Leo. She had gotten up from her seat and walked quietly down the aisle. She stepped up onto the stage. She didn't interrupt. She slowly, carefully, placed her own hands flat on the polished wooden lid of the grand piano. She closed her eyes. Mr. Hendricks stared, his interruption forgotten. On stage, Leo's playing began to change. The chaotic clashing faded. His left hand found a slow, steady series of deep notes, a heartbeat. His right hand began to search, playing one note, then another, then a simple open chord, then another. It was hesitant at first, like someone finding their way in the dark. but the chords were clean and clear. They were the smooth stone feelings. He began to play them in a sequence, letting them ring into each other. The vibration changed from one of turmoil to one of gentle resolution. It wasn't a happy song, but it felt like hope, like a quiet dawn, and then he stopped. The last chord hung in the air, its vibration slowly fading from the strings. The auditorium was utterly silent. Mr. Hendricks was about to speak, to say the polite, "Thank you, Leo," when Miss Alvarez opened her eyes. She took her hands off the piano lid. There were tears shining in them. She turned to the judges in the third row. "Wait," she said, her voice clear and strong in the quiet hall. She pointed to the piano. "Don't just listen. Feel it." Mr. Hendricks was confused. "What?" "Feel it," Miss Alvarez repeated, her voice insistent. "Come up here. Put your hands on the piano. He's not playing for your ears. He's playing for your bones." A strange, heavy curiosity settled over Mr. Hendricks. He looked at the principal, who nodded, intrigued. The small group of adults rose from their seats and walked to the stage. They felt awkward, foolish. Mr. Hendricks hesitated, then placed his palms on the cool, smooth wood of the piano. The others did the same. "Again, Leo," Miss Alvarez signed to him. "Play it from the beginning, please." Leo, who had been sitting quietly, watching this strange event, understood. He nodded. He placed his hands back on the keys, and he played his piece again. This time, with his hands on the instrument, Mr. Hendricks didn't just hear the boom and clatter. He felt it. The initial rumbles traveled up through the wood and into his arms. They were powerful, lonely tremors. The clashing chords weren't just unpleasant sounds. They were jarring, prickly vibrations that made his palms itch with unease. He felt the story, the isolation, the confusion. Then came the change, the surging chords. As Leo found that sequence of harmonies, the vibrations under Mr. Hendricks's hands changed completely. The prickliness melted away. The vibrations became deep, warm, resonant pulses. They were steady and comforting. They spread through his hands and up his arms, a physical sensation of tension releasing, of light finding a way in. He wasn't hearing music. He was feeling a life. A boy's silent journey from a world of quiet to confusion to a moment of pure, vibrating connection. When Leo finished, Mr. Hendricks took his hands from the piano. He looked at his own palms, as if seeing them for the first time. He looked at Leo, who was watching him, a quiet question in his eyes. He looked at Miss Alvarez, whose face was full of a fierce, knowing joy. The old director, the man who had built his life on the certainty of sound, felt the ground shift under his feet. The walls of his understanding cracked. He had been so wrong. Music wasn't a kingdom of sound. It was a kingdom of the heart, and it could be reached by many roads. This boy hadn't just found a back door. He had revealed a whole new wing of the palace. He didn't know what to say. Words felt too small, too loud. He simply looked at Leo and, for the first time, truly saw him. Then, slowly, he nodded. It wasn't a nod of approval for an audition. It was a nod of recognition, from one person to another. The message was clear, and it needed no sound at all. "I understand." The week before the winter concert was a blur of quiet preparation. After the audition, Mr. Hendricks had asked to meet with Leo, his mother, and the interpreter. In his small office, cluttered with sheet music, he spoke differently. His voice was softer, his words careful. "What Leo does. It isn't conventional," he began, signing along as the interpreter translated. "The audience, they will come expecting to hear something familiar. We need to help them experience what he does. We need to guide them to listen in a new way." The plan they came up with was simple, but for a school concert, it was radical. Leo would open the show. But before he played, Mr. Hendricks would address the audience, and they would all be asked to participate in a way no one expected. The night of the concert arrived. The school auditorium was packed with parents, grandparents, and squirmy younger siblings. It smelled of winter coats and perfume. Backstage, the chorus kids in their white shirts and black pants whispered nervously. Leo stood in a corner with his mother, wearing a simple blue button-down shirt. He wasn't nervous about the playing. He was nervous about the sea of watching eyes. His mother smoothed his hair and signed, "Just show them your beautiful shake." That's all. The house lights dimmed. A low chatter washed over the crowd and then faded. Mr. Hendricks walked out onto the stage, alone under the spotlight. He cleared his throat, gripping the sides of the podium. "Good evening," he said. His voice echoed a little in the quiet hall. "Welcome to our winter concert. Our first performer tonight is going to offer us a gift. But to receive it, we will need your help. You will need to listen, not just with your ears." He paused, looking out at the puzzled faces. "Our first musician is Leo. He will be playing an original composition on the piano. Leo is deaf. He does not hear the notes as you and I do. He feels the music as a physical vibration. That is the language he is speaking to us tonight." A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. People leaned forward. "So," Mr. Hendricks continued, "we ask for your silence. Not just quiet, but deep stillness. Please, no whispering, no shifting in your seats. And as he plays, if you feel so moved, I invite you to place your hand over your heart. Not to applaud with sound, but to feel the music where he feels it. Let's experience this together." He gave a small, stiff nod and walked off the stage. The single spotlight shifted, settling on the grand piano. The curtain behind it was a deep, dark blue, like a night sky. Leo walked out. The sound of his footsteps on the stage was huge in the silence. He climbed onto the bench. He looked small next to the big piano. He placed his hands in his lap, took a slow breath, and closed his eyes. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just a small boy sitting in a pool of light, and hundreds of people holding their breath. Then he began. The first low boom of the bass notes was not just heard. It was felt in the floor. The vibration traveled through the stage and into the first few rows. People jumped slightly, surprised by the physicality of it. Leo played his storm, his confusion. The sounds were strange, sometimes harsh to the ear. But the audience, guided by Mr. Hendricks's words, didn't listen for a tune. They watched his face, etched with concentration. They felt the rough vibrations in their own chests from the powerful bass notes. Then the music began to turn. The searching chords started. They were simpler, clearer. They rang out in the silent hall, each one a question that found its answer in the next. Leo's expression softened. His shoulders, which had been hunched, relaxed. He wasn't just playing notes now. He was weaving a tapestry of feeling with his hands in the audience. A woman in the second row, without thinking, placed her hand over her heart. She had felt a particular chord, not just in her ears, but as a deep resonance in her bones. It reminded her of something she couldn't name, a memory of comfort. The man next to her saw her do it, and he did the same. Then a child. Then a whole row. It spread silently, like a wave. Hands rising, palms flat against chests. People weren't doing it because they were told to. They were doing it because the music, this strange vibration-filled music, was pulling them into Leo's world. They were feeling the journey from loneliness to connection, not as a story told, but as a physical truth shared. Backstage, peeking through the curtain, Mr. Hendricks watched. He saw the hands rising. He saw the faces, not confused or pitying, but moved, thoughtful, some with tears glistening on their cheeks. He looked at his own hands. then slowly placed one over his own heart. He felt the final resonant chords of Leo's piece through the floor, and for the first time in his life, he felt music not as a director, but as a fellow traveler. Leo played the last gentle chord. He held the pedal down, letting the vibration live as long as it could. Then he lifted his hands and placed them gently in his lap. He opened his eyes. He saw the audience, and he saw a forest of hands held over hundreds of hearts. A silent, unified gesture that filled the vast space. No one clapped. The silence was profound, thick with meaning. For a boy who lived in silence, this was not an absence. It was a fullness. It was the most beautiful sound he had never heard. He didn't know what to do. He looked out, his eyes wide. Then, hesitantly, he raised his own small hand and placed it over his own heart. A connection snapped into place, visible and electric. A sob escaped someone in the crowd, quickly hushed. After what felt like an eternity, the hands slowly came down. Mr. Hendricks walked back onto the stage. He didn't say a word. He simply stood beside the piano, looked at Leo, and gave a deep, respectful bow. Then he offered his hand. Leo slid off the bench and took it. Together, they walked off the stage as the spotlight faded. The rest of the concert was lovely. The chorus sang beautifully. But everyone who was there knew the real performance had already happened. It had happened in the silence, in the vibrations under their feet, and in the shared beating of their hearts. After the final bow, as the crowd milled in the hallway for cookies and punch, people sought out Leo and his mother. They didn't say, "That was amazing." They said things like, "Thank you for that experience," or, "I felt something I've never felt before." A man in a suit, a local businessman, crouched down to Leo's level and signed a clumsy "Thank you," his hands fumbling but his eyes sincere. Mr. Hendricks found them too. He handed Leo a small, flat box. Inside was not a trophy, but a beautiful old tuning fork. He took Leo's hand and gently pressed the base of the fork against his wrist after striking it. A pure, clear vibration buzzed against the boy's skin. Leo's face lit with a smile of recognition. It was a star-twinkle feeling, given as a gift. "It's for your journey." Mr. Hendricks signed slowly, his movements new and deliberate. "You have a lot more to say." That night, at home, Leo's mother tucked him into bed. The house was quiet again, just the two of them. She signed, "You showed them a new world tonight." Leo thought about it, his hands moving sleepily under the covers. "No," he signed back, "I showed them our world. They just never felt it before." He rolled over, his hand drifting to the wall beside his bed. From the living room, through the floor and the beams, came the faintest, warmest echo of a vibration, the old piano settling, or maybe just the memory of a chord. He smiled, feeling it in his fingertips. He wasn't a boy who couldn't hear music anymore. He was a boy who could feel the whole world singing, and now he knew he wasn't the only one listening.